Hey, hey, from West Virginia. I think we're getting there. I think we're getting close. But what we are close to is Joke of the Day, because we're ready for Joke of the Day, and I've got a great one for you today. And it's very timely in terms of what we're going to be looking at today. So why did the football coach go to the bank? Why did the football coach go to the bank? Because he was trying to get his quarterback. Because in football we have quarterbacks and you get a quarter at a bank and he's getting his quarterback. Okay, all right. But I think this joke of the day is so timely because we're going to be looking at adding sign numbers. And one of the ways that I like to teach sign numbers is to liken it to football. So I have brought my handy dandy mathematical football helmet. You can see that I am on team math, positive and negative. So let's put that football helmet on and let's get ready to play a little bit with that pigskin. So what happens here is we are going to be adding up sign numbers. There we go. I'm ready to go now. Awesome. Okay. We're going to be adding up sign numbers. And let me explain a little bit about football for those who don't understand it. You have what's called a scrimmage line, and the scrimmage line is your starting point. If you are on the offense, that means you've got the ball and you are heading to your goal so that you can score some points. If you're on the defense, you're trying to prevent the offense from making it to their goal. That's the bottom line of football. There's a whole lot of other little details, but for these purposes of this math, that's all we need to know. So I'm going to be on offense, and what I'm going to do is, let's say that my goal is down here. So I neglected to draw my goal post down here, but here is my goal post. That's where I'm headed. So I have a scrimmage line that's my starting point. Now if you can't follow football, just picture this to be a number line, and this will work perfectly fine with a number line. So let's say my scrimmage line is right here, and so I'm going to call this ground zero. So again, if you don't understand football, this is 0 on your number line. So what happens here is, if I'm adding up a couple of sign numbers, now, let me back this up here. I've got the wrong scrimmage line. My deepest apologies. Let me step this back. Okay, my scrimmage line is actually going to be right about here. There we go. That's my ground zero. Now, again, I'm on offense, so I'm heading in this direction, heading to my goal. The defense is trying to prevent me from going that way. So if I'm starting right here at ground zero, let's say that on the first play, the defense does a darn good job of preventing me from going forward. The defense actually kicks me backwards 6 yards. Okay, so they have kicked me back 6 yards. So now I'm kicked back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There is a 6-yard loss. So now I'm sitting right here. Remember, I started off here. I just took a 6-yard loss. Now on the next play, the defense did another great job. I'm starting right here at a 6-yard loss. I'm trying to go forward like this, but the defense once again did a fantastic job. They kicked me backwards again. So on the next play, I've been kicked back 2 yards. 1, 2, there's my 2-yard loss. So in the course of these 2 plays, being that I started right here, trying to head in this direction, but I got kicked backwards like this, would you say that I have a net gain or a net loss in those 2 plays? Yes, this is a net loss. And the way that we show loss is that we show it with a negative sign. So when I take that -6 and I add into it that -2, I have that net loss, and I'm going to show that with a negative. What is my net loss? How far back did I get kicked? Well, I got kicked back 6, and then I got kicked back 2 more. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I had a net loss of 8 yards. So therefore, I'm going to represent that this way with a -8. Now, here's the thing though. When I'm adding up all these sign numbers, I don't know about you, but even though I'm enjoying playing football, and this is so much fun, I don't want to have to draw a football field every single time I'm adding up sign numbers. Frankly, I don't even want to have to draw a number line every time I'm adding up sign numbers. What I would prefer to do is just have a couple of rules so that I would be able to do this in my head instead. So let's take a look at this problem and figure out what happened without the use of this football field or without the use of a number line. Well, if you take a look at it, how did we get this digit of 8? Sure, if we ignore the signs here and just take the 6 and the 2, add them together because it says addition, that's going to give me an 8. So perhaps that's one of the rules, and it is one of the rules. So the first step for being able to add up two signed numbers is you're going to simply add the digits. And what that means is I'm going to ignore the signs and just simply add the digits. Ignore the signs and add the digits. That will give me the digit part of my answer. Now, how did I get this negative on here? Sure, what happened was I said, well, both of these had a negative, so I'm going to keep that sign of negative. And that is the second step or the second rule in order to be able to add up your signed numbers. When the signs are the same, that's the key right here, same sign, I'm going to keep the sign. Because, you know, quite frankly, I like it that they're alike. We like that they're alike, so keep that sign. So if that's the case, let's take a look at these next two examples. Now, frankly, on the football field, I don't want to have to deal with decimals of yards, and I certainly don't want to deal with fractions of yards. So let's utilize our rules then. So I've got a negative 4.7 plus a negative 5.6. According to my rules, and my sign, remember, the signs are the same, so I'm going to keep that sign. So therefore, in my answer, it's going to be negative, and I'm going to add up the digits, ignoring the signs. So I'm going to take that 4.7 and that 5.6, ignore the signs, and just simply add the digits. Well, 4.7 plus 5.6 will actually give me a 10.3, so my answer will be a negative 10.3. Yes, a negative 10.3. My apologies. So now, let's take a look at the next one. We're adding up a couple of fractions. Once again, let's figure out that sign first. Well, notice that they are both negatives, and so if they're both negatives, since they have the same sign, I'm going to keep that sign. So I'm going to keep the fact that they are negatives, and I'm going to let my answer be a negative. Now I'm going to add up the digits, and I'm going to ignore those signs. So in ignoring the signs, I'm going to say, well, I'm going to take a 2/3 and a 5/7, and I'm going to add them together. Now, what does it take to add fractions? Yes, common denominator. Remember, multiplying fractions, the x for multiplication, that's when you cancel on those diagonals, but we're not multiplying fractions here, we're adding fractions. So that means common denominator. So I'm going to look at my 3 and my 7, and I'm going to say, what's the smallest number they will both go into? Yes, they'll both go into a 21. So my common denominator is going to be a 21. And so now I'm going to say I'm going to take that 3 and multiply it by 7 to get a 21, and I have to do the same thing on that numerator. As we discovered before, whenever we're adding up fractions, you multiply numerator and denominator by that same factor so that you're really just multiplying by a 1. Notice here that 7 over 7 is a 1, and when you multiply by 1, you don't change value, you only change looks. So I'm going to multiply my numerator by 1 and get a 14. So I have a negative 14 over 21. And then over here, I'm going to take my 7, I'm going to multiply it by 3, which means multiply my numerator by 3. Well, 5 times 3 is 15, giving me a negative 15 over 21. Now again, the fact that they're both negative indicates that my sign on my answer is going to be a negative. But now in dealing with those digits, I do have the common denominators here. When you have a common denominator, you keep that denominator because you worked really hard to get it. So keep the denominator of 21 and add up those numerators. So a 14 plus a 15 will give me a 29. And remember, I don't have to turn it into a mixed number. Now, if I started with a mixed number, then I definitely need to end with a mixed number, but I didn't. I always simplify fractions if I can. Is there a number that will go into both 29 and 21? There is not, so I'm done. And this is simplified, and that is the correct answer. So, as you can see, when you're adding up two numbers that have the same sign, we like it that the signs are the same. So we're going to keep that sign. Hey, it's all the same. Let's just keep it. And we're going to add up those digits to come up with the numerical answer for our answer. Now, let's take a look at a different concept this time. flip this board around and let's take a look at the idea of adding up two numbers that this time they have different signs. Oh, okay, different signs. How is that going to affect this? Well, again, let's take a look at our football field here. And I'm going to put my goalpost down here one more time. And I'm going to put my line of scrimmage right here one more time. Yes, right here's my line of scrimmage. And again, if you don't like the idea of the football, then just picture this to be a number line where this is the 0. So let's take a look at this first example here at -9 plus 3. Now remember, this is my starting point at the 0, the line of scrimmage. My goal is to head this direction because there's my goalpost. My being the offense, I'm trying to go here. My defense is coming at me this way, trying to prevent that from happening. Now, notice here on the first play, defense did a great job. I took a 9-yard loss on the first play. So that means if I started here and I took that 9-yard loss, they kicked me back like this. So what's going to happen here is I'm going to be kicked back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's my 9-yard loss. So I'm kicked back here, still trying to go this way, but I got thrown back. This is not going well for me. But notice that on the second play, my offense kind of pulled it together and we said, hey, we're going to make this happen. And we actually went forward 3 yards. So we had started here. Now, originally we started here. We got kicked back 9 yards. Now we're sitting here and we say, okay, we're going to truck it forward. Now, in trucking it forward, we go up 1, 2, 3. There is my +3. So now I have landed here. Now, notice the fact that this was my beginning point and I am now right here, the question is still begged as, is that a net gain or a net loss? Within these two plays, did we get a net gain or did we get a net loss? Started here, ended here, trying to go that way. Well, yes, this is still a net loss, even though we did pretty well right here. Still, between the two plays, we still took a hit and went backwards based on where we're trying to head. So therefore, that means that in this problem, net loss. And that is a negative. Now, what is my net loss? If I started here and ended here, I kicked back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is a net loss of 6 yards. So now, once again, like I said before, I really don't want to have to draw a football field every time I'm adding up sign numbers. I don't even want to have to draw a number line every time I'm adding up sign numbers. I need a couple of rules that are going to make this solid for me so that I could just do this in my head. So let's do a comparison in the problem that we just looked at and see if we can come up with those rules. First off, how did we come up with this 6? How did we get that part? Yes, notice that if you take 3 away from 9, in other words, like we said on the other situation where they had the same sign, we said ignore the signs at first. Just ignore the signs. Here, when we ignore the signs, what happens is we take the smaller digit away from the larger digit. Yes, that is subtraction, but I hesitate to use the word subtraction because that gets to be a little bit confusing for people, especially when we start subtracting sign numbers. So what I like to say is take the smaller digit from the larger digit. So let's write that down as our first rule. Ignore signs. Very important that we do that. Ignore signs and take smaller digit away from the larger digit. Away from the larger digit. Okay? Well, that's fantastic for giving us the 6, but how did we come up with the negative? I mean, hey, we have a negative and a positive. How are we going to come up with a negative? We got 2 choices here. Before it was easy because we said before, well, they have the same sign, so let's just keep the sign. That's easy. But here I got different signs, so how do I decide whether it's going to be the negative or the positive? Now, notice that when I look at those digits, the bigger digit, I kept its sign because the bigger digit overpowers this digit. Notice here when we played football, this bigger, even though it was a net loss, it overpowered the gain. it definitely overpowered it because there was more of a loss than there was a gain. This overpowers. So what you do is, now you pay attention to the sign and you take the sign of the larger digit. So let's write that down. Take sign of larger digit. And there's your rule. If we follow those rules, notice that if we ignore the signs, take smaller from larger, 3 from 9 is 6, and if we take the sign of a larger digit, 9 is the larger digit, and its sign is negative, giving us the -6 we had for our answer. So there's your rule, so that you don't have to draw a football field every time, and so that you don't have to draw a number line every time. So now let's take a look at the other two examples. Here I have a 1.2, notice that it's positive, plus a -6.5. Now I need to figure out the sign of it, and what I'm going to do, actually first I'm going to ignore the signs and I'm just going to work the digits. So let's take the smaller 1.2 away from the larger 6.5, and 1.2 from 6.5 is going to be a 5.3. And now I just have to decide, is it going to be a positive or a -5.3? Which digit is larger? That's the 6.5. What's its sign? It's negative. So we're going to take the negative sign from that. And so my answer is going to be a -5.3. So let's take a look at the fractions. Once again, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to deal with the digits, and I'm going to take the smaller digit from the larger digit. But when they're fractions, it's really difficult to tell which is the smaller digit and which is the larger digit. So I'm going to get those common denominators in order to figure that out. So therefore, I'm going to say, well, for an 8 and 11, the common denominator is 88. So I'm going to convert everything to 88ths. Now that first one is still negative, and the second one is still positive. Now I'll multiply the 8 by 11, which means multiply the 3 by 11, giving me a -33 over 88. I'm going to multiply the 11 by 8, which means multiply the 6 by 8, giving me a 48. And now, once again, I'm going to take the smaller digit from the larger digit. Now remember, I worked awfully hard to get that common denominator, so I'm going to keep it. And I'm going to take the smaller numerator away from the larger numerator because I'm ignoring the signs right now. So 33 from 48 is going to be a 15. And I'm going to take the sign of the larger one because it overpowers. The 48 is larger than the 33, so I'll take its sign, which means my answer is positive. Now, I always simplify fractions if I can. Is there a number that will go into both 15 and 88? Well, only an 8, a 4, a 2, and an 11 will go into 88. Will any of those go into 15? No. Or you could look at it as the only things that will go into 15 are 5, 3, and 15. Will 5, 3, or 15 go into 88? No. So this is simplified, and it's as good as it will get. So I hope that this helps you with the concept of adding up sign numbers. Remember that when the signs are the same, that's the easiest case because we like it they're the same. We're going to keep those signs and we're just going to add the digits. Pretty easy. But when the signs are different, a little bit of a more difficult problem, but not too terribly difficult because we're going to ignore the signs at first. We're going to take the smaller digit away from the larger digit, and then we're going to keep the sign of the larger digit. I hope that helps. Have a great day.